Welcome to 1850 Main Street, a place where friends get together and talk about their country and hope for a brighter future. Today, Rob Walgate and Alan C. Duncan from the Public Square are joined by David Zanotti, the CEO of the American Policy Roundtable.
Should newspapers be endorsing political candidates to try and affect the outcome of elections?
I started working at the American Policy Roundtable in the spring of 2003. So the first major election cycle that I was an employee was that of 2004. And I can remember talking with DZ in the week leading up to that election day, because back then it was more like an election day, not an election month.
Yeah, remember those days?
Or an election 6 weeks. But we were talking about the Columbus Dispatch and the polls that would come out from folks around the state and what they would say was going to happen. Now, they had released endorsements leading up to that on maybe some statewide candidates. Or in 2004, it would have been a presidential race, so not a statewide race in Ohio, but a presidential race. But you would have had state Senate races and state House races, so many other things. But the newspapers were involved. And here we are 20 years later, and we've seen a little bit of a shift in a few of them across the country. And that's caused a bit of an outcry. And what I'm obviously referring to is the Washington Post. And I believe, was it the LA Times as well? The Washington Post and the LA Times, neither of those publications issued an endorsement for the top of the ticket for the race for the presidency. That's caused a bit of surprise in some people. It's caused outrage in some. Me, I've just kind of sat back and said, well, we were at a point in this time previously in history. But Dave, I mean, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, the furor is kind of interesting, especially at the Washington Post. And it's created all kinds of spin-off conversations as well. But the poll you're referring used to be called the Ohio poll, and it was a mail-in poll. Remember that?
Yes.
The Columbus Dispatch had built a network of names and addresses over the years of people that they could count on to be truthful with them and to return a lengthy public opinion poll, and that they would be honest. And it was an extraordinarily accurate poll. If a person was willing to sit down and fill out on paper their opinions on certain races and issues and mail it, send it back in, they weren't getting paid to do it, they found that it turned out to be very reliable over many, many years in regards to the election results. And so the reason that poll would happen was because on election day, everybody voted except perhaps the absentee and overseas votes. And different states had different absentee rules. But election day, so what the poll was supposed to give you a good read on was the momentum. And the idea is, had the race broken for one candidate or another in the statewide races? And that used to be a big thing on polling. I can remember another year, Rob, where you and I were involved in a statewide campaign on a ballot issue regarding casino gambling, and it was a ferocious battle. Our opponents spent $40 million to our spending $1 million. And we were supposed to get mopped up and thrown away. I mean, it was supposed to, and I can remember that the chairman of the casino committee that was trying to pass this called us on a Friday afternoon. I can remember where I was when I got the call. I was in Orlando at the time. And he called us and he said, I wanted to congratulate you on running a magnificent campaign. And I expected him to say, it's just unfortunate that you lost. And because this guy was a very big wheel. He was one of the top two biggest wheels in politics in this state, the biggest consultants. He said, and I want to congratulate you. You kicked our butts.
No, I remember where I was when you called me.
So I'm not exactly sure how you did that. I really don't know. I've learned so much from watching what you all have done. He said, I've got a lot more lessons to learn, but I just have to tell you, well done.
You called me after that phone call, and I was in your office in Strongsville. I was sitting in there in the library, your old office in Strongsville, and you called me and you said, I need to talk to you. And I said, okay. And you said, if you have any speaking engagements over the weekend on the issues, still do them, still work the way you were going to work. Don't change anything. But we won. We're going to win.
It's an overwhelming feeling. It doesn't happen very often, and it doesn't happen at all anymore.
Right.
Rarely does it happen because polling has by and large fallen apart in our country. Now, it's not that polling companies don't wish that it was better, but the polling companies didn't invent the cell phone. And the cell phone is a technology that kind of broke the industry because now you know who's calling when the phone rings and you don't have to answer it. Okay.
Telemarketer.
And now some of them say political call.
Yep. Yeah.
Okay. So now you can duck them. So the idea of getting that old objectivity of the Columbus Dispatch's Ohio poll has largely disappeared. So what they're doing is they're doing online polls. They're trying to keep focus groups together. And what it means is that their margins of error are really squishy. So they can miss it. Now, they keep trying to get better, and they are polling perpetually because people have the endless desire to know what's going to happen next and to have that moment of knowing before anybody else knows that you've won or that you've lost. I can remember in 1980, Jimmy Carter, running for his second term in office, was advised on Saturday afternoon, Mr. President, you've lost the election. Our overnight polls show it's not possible for you to recover from the demise of the voter turnout. The race, sir, has broken the other way. Well, we seldom now get the opportunity to catch one of those breaks, particularly the bigger the race and whether it's a statewide or a national race. But newspaper editorials have often been delivered right at the end in the hope of pushing momentum for one candidate or another. So when the Washington Post, one of the two papers of record in the United States, and the LA Times, who might be close to the third, say they're not endorsing, what's up with that?
Well, especially when you think of the Washington Post and their decision to do it, and they said that decision came from one person at the top, the owner of the publication, Jeff Bezos.
Jeff Bezos, yeah.
Yeah, he's the one who said some of the opinion writers, the editorial writers have resigned since this decision was made. They said they were prepared to make the endorsement. And listen, let's face it.
They said it was written. They said the endorsement was written. So that would be an interesting leak to see. So I'm not saying they should or shouldn't, but it would be an interesting leak.
If someone can leak Supreme Court decisions, I think we can opinions. I think we can leak that, and no one.
And hey, listen, I get it. If somebody felt strongly that their paper had an editorial voice and it was written and they wanted to endorse it and they said and they felt it was withheld. And it shouldn't have been, I get why someone would resign. It makes sense to me. I've quit jobs before because I didn't like something the organization was doing. So that's another story for another day. But yeah, I'm not above that. So I respect that. Tip of the cap,
iVoters.com changes everything about the way we process elections. Instead of negative TV and radio ads and biased opinions from editorial boards, now people in all 50 states can get the facts about candidates and ballot issues from a nonpartisan, independent source. iVoters is fast, free, secure, and powerful. With iVoters, you can vote with confidence and encourage others to do the same. Free minds, free speech, free agents. iVoters.com, a public service of the American Policy Roundtable.
Well, what's interesting, of course, is that each of the people who are dissatisfied have the right to publish their own opinions.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I'm sure they're going to.
They can't be silenced as individuals. The question becomes really a question of stewardship and ownership. And I guess maybe a question of reality. I don't exactly know what the employees of these papers expected when an individual purchased them, that perhaps somewhere down the line, the vested interest of the owner would perhaps collide somewhere along the line with the editorial board. It could happen. And in this case, it did. Now, it wasn't that the editorial board was going to endorse candidate A and the owner said, no, I'm for B. The owner simply said, it's not in my best interests as the company that I used to buy and pay your salaries with. Oh, by the way, the Washington Post lost $77 million last year. So the owner clearly had to make up the difference to make sure that people were still around. And he couldn't do that from a $77 million loss basis. So it was okay when he kept the company alive and going from his other assets. But now he says, I see no margin in picking one or the other. On this, we're not going to. Now, maybe he could have done it sooner. I don't know how the information went down. But the fact of the matter is, what'd you expect?
Well, we've talked about these papers being a loss leader for a lot of these big corporations. So is this a sign of them not treating it as a loss leader anymore? Or do you think
this is a sign of how big a loss they're willing to endure?
Yeah.
Or how big they're willing to take. Or I have a question as well. We know people resigned because they didn't make an endorsement. Would more or less people have resigned had he said, no, we're going to endorse the other candidate?
Right.
I mean, so that's another thing entirely to look at, because there's going to become some point where at this point they just said, we're not endorsing. To your point, DZ, there may become a time where they will endorse the other side. And then how many employees will you lose?
Yeah.
Well, an interesting fact that came out in one of the reports about this story was that there are in the United States of America right now, there are 21 million total newspaper subscriptions. That would be print and online. 21 million households have a subscription to a newspaper. Now, there's 187 million people who are members of Amazon Prime and pay that subscription annually. So if I'm Jeff Bezos, which number is bigger?
The old Michael Jordan adage, right?
Republicans buy sneakers too.
How does that one work?
Well, they encouraged him like crazy when he was a young basketball star, and he really didn't want to be involved in politics. And the premise of it is you're going to be making half the people mad if you give out some sort of endorsement or get involved in a campaign of some sort. I think that was the title, if I'm not mistaken, of Clay Travis's book, Republicans Buy Sneakers Too, highlighting that fact and talking about that.
See, I don't love that story because I do. I mean, it's funny and it shows where he comes from, but it also just shows kind of the ultimate commodification of a human being. Like he kind of made himself into a brand. I mean, the Jordan logo is literally his whole body. That's the logo. You made yourself a logo. I mean, and that's cool on one level, but I do think people should be able to honestly say what they think politically and not face the backlash or the repercussions of a culture. But that means the whole culture has some work to do.
I can't believe I'm going to take us here, but I will. There was an article, they were talking about Taylor Swift. Now, Taylor Swift has endorsed Kamala Harris for president, but she's good friends with people who are supporters of Donald Trump. And they were like, able to put politics aside and able to do it. Now, there's some people that think she's evil because of the fact she associates with the people that support Donald Trump. And I'm like, this blows my mind. Like they act like you can't have friends that.
Yeah, we need to be able to talk like adults in this country. Again, we may not agree on everything. You still got to talk to people. You might disagree wildly.
I sit with you all the time.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Exactly.
All right. Speaking of bringing a grown-up into the room, let's offer one product that we can. All right. That will help.
Where did Melanie go? Melanie was in here for recording the public
mother.
Yeah.
Somebody call Patty. Let's get somebody in here that can control this. We have a product to offer, and it's not for profit, and it doesn't endorse anybody, and it's not a monthly subscription, and you can't dial up that number or go online and order products from it. But you can go online and get iVoters.com, and it's not too late to do that. What is iVoters.com? iVoters.com is a nonpartisan, nonprofit, educational voter information site where you can punch in your home address, not your name, just your street address, and up will pop on your screen the candidates that you will see on your ballot when you go to vote. Now, a lot of people listening and watching, you've already voted. Thank you. Thank you for voting. But you know people who haven't. And one way you can compliment them and encourage them is at iVoters.com. That simple way of going will give you an opportunity to help them. And when they get there, they'll see the candidates, they'll see endorsements for and against, they'll see the ballot issues anywhere in the country, all 50 states. You can go to ivoters.com and help somebody get encouraged. Why do I say this? Because the biggest reason people don't vote, there's two reasons. One, they don't believe their vote counts. And two, they haven't done their homework and they don't want to make a mistake. And I respect that. I respect the fact that people don't want to go in there and mess it up. But this helps that situation dramatically. We've basically, Rob, you and your team have done the homework for us. All we've got to do is look at it.
Take a little time. I always say, we'll put the food on the plate for you, but we're not going to feed you. You got to go in and feed yourself. You got to look at it all yourself. So all of it's been done. You just have to enter your address and your zip code, and up will pop. And you're going to get lost in there spending a little time. You may live in a state that has a ballot issue. And you're like, wait a minute, I need to read that exact language of that ballot issue. I did radio in Florida this week, and we were talking there because they have one regarding hunting and fishing. And it's a page and a half, and I think a paragraph or two of new changes that would be an amendment. And the people I was talking to were like, oh, we can just read that, and it'll tell us everything right there. I said, just read it and go right there.
Not much time left before this election. A lot of people have already voted, but a lot haven't. So I want to encourage you, ivoters.com, ivoters with an S.com.
The conversations are just getting started. To get connected, check out 1850mainstreet.com. And to get the facts on the candidates and issues that are going to be on your ballot this November, visit ivoters.com and enter your address and zip code. No name, no phone number, and no email address required. We don't want your personal information, and we don't want your money. We want you to be well informed. So please share this podcast and ivoters.com with a friend today so they too can vote with confidence and encourage others to do the same. Thanks for stopping by today. We'll see you next time here at 1850 Main Street.